Have you ever heard the term the elephant in the room? It actually came from a short story that was written many years ago by a Russian author. And he tells the story of a man who goes to a museum and he sees every little minute detail in the museum, but in the center of the museum is a large elephant, and the man never saw the elephant. Several years later, an artist was inspired from that story to draw a picture of a room, and the walls were covered with a patterned wallpaper. And then he drew an elephant in the middle of the room, and he colored the elephant in with the same pattern of the wallpaper, so it would look like the elephant was blending into the room. So we have this term, the elephant in the room, that everybody kind of knows it's there, or maybe they don't know it's there, maybe they ignore it. For the Israelites, if you in the story that we had this past week, Achan's sin was the elephant in the room, and that elephant was very difficult to find. The Israelites had just experienced a great victory over Jericho, but they were told that they were to take nothing from the city of Jericho. But Achan decided he wanted to just kind of grab a couple things. They looked very valuable. Maybe he wanted souvenirs to give to his kids, some kind of a memento of this great victory that Israel had. And he took these items and he buried them in his tent. He dug a hole in the ground, buried them in his tent. And then when Israel went to fight the next battle, they were so pumped over the victory that they had over Jericho that they're thinking, oh, we don't need all that many people to fight Ai. I mean, this is small compared to what Jericho and the walls. So they went to fight Ai, and they suffered a horrible loss. 3,000 men killed. So after that, suffering that defeat, Joshua, the leader of the Israelites at that time, falls on his face before the Ark of the Covenant because something had gone wrong. Now he's on his face. He's either praying or he's in mourning over the loss of so many of his military. He might have been questioning, what was I thinking when I took this position to lead these people? I must have been out of my mind. Why am I doing this? God doesn't take sin lightly, and especially in this situation, because Israel was ready to go into the promised land. Joshua was going to lead them there. Moses brought them to the brink, but now Joshua was going to, they were under Joshua's leadership, they were going to move into and take possession of what God had promised them so many years before. But whenever God does something new, he wants it to be a pure, clean foundation. And so Achan's sin affected the entire nation and would have kept them from going into the promised land. So God sees Joshua on his face. Now, there are times when God will comfort us and say, don't you worry, I'll take care of this. I got your back. Everything is fine. But there are other times when God will grab us by the neck and pull us up and say, what are you doing down on your face? Move into action. And that's what he did with Joshua. Stand up. What are you doing down on your face? When life slams us with challenging times or disappointments or difficulties, we have a choice of how we're going to react. And God wants us to be people of maturity and character who will be responsible for doing our part in whatever situations may come our way. You imagine if Joshua and the elders of Israel had done nothing about Achan's sin. What if they had just covered it up? I've got a hunch they never would have made it into the promised land, because God wanted them to go into this nation on a pure, faultless foundation. It kind of makes me wonder, maybe sometimes we don't make progress in our own lives because we haven't stood up to do something that God has instructed us to do. God gave Joshua 3 instructions in this story, and let's look at each of these and see how they would apply to us. First of all, he says to him, stand up. Face the reality of what's going on. In fact, here's the reality for Joshua, and I'll just read it. God said, Israel has sinned. They have violated my covenant, which I commanded them to keep. They have taken some of the devoted things. They have stolen. They have lied. They have put them with their own possessions. And then God changes the pronoun and he says, I will not be with you anymore unless you destroy, talking to Joshua, what is among you that shouldn't be there. So somebody else had committed the sin, but God is putting the responsibility of finding the person who committed that sin. He puts that responsibility on Joshua. So why do we go down on our faces? Well, one reason is some people just live in denial. Denial is a very comfortable place for them. Denial is more comfortable than confronting. And sometimes we just want to hang on to that comfort. It's kind of like the young girl who had been abused by her father for years, and when the girl finally got up enough courage to go to the mother and beg for help, the mother convinced the girl, it's all in your mind, there's nothing going on, your father is a good man. She went into denial, and even when the girl went to her pastor and told the pastor what was happening, the pastor couldn't believe it and said, I think you're making this up. Your father is a deacon in the church. He's a man of good standing. He's done wonderful things in the church. I think you're making this up. That abuse continued until that girl was in her 30s, and she moved to another state with the help of a sibling who had heard about her abusive situation. You see, going into denial and saying, if I ignore it, it doesn't exist, that is not the best thing to do. Or sometimes when we go down on our face, we just don't want to get involved in anything. You know, we're aware it's there, but we don't want to make any waves. And we certainly don't want to offend the other person, which is something that's always kind of troubled me. You know, we might hear somebody who maybe they're a terrible gossip. They gossip about a lot of people, and they just hurt reputations, and they're just very damaging in their words. But we don't want to go confront the gossiper because we're afraid we're going to offend them. But we forget about all the offense and the damage that they have done. But yet, we just don't really want to get involved because we don't want to hurt them. Or we just take a passive approach where we say, God will take care of it. God will take care of it. Yeah, you know, there are some things God indeed will take care of, but those are things that we can't take care of ourselves, things that are beyond our control. And that's where we release them to the Lord and say, God, I can't do anything. You're going to have to do something with this. But God will not do something for us that he intends for us to do ourselves, because stepping up and taking responsibility is a part of growth and maturity. It's a part of character developing. It's a necessary part of our spiritual maturity. So for us to become passive and to say, oh, God will take care of it, that's my excuse, I'm not going to have to do anything. You see, you have passivity on this side where I'm not going to get involved, I'm just going to ignore it. But on the other side is aggression. You've got the passive and you've got the aggressive over here. The aggressive would be responding out of emotions, responding out of anger, probably doing more harm than was originally done by the first person. But in between passive and aggressive is a thing that's called assertive. And this is where we want to function. We don't want to go passive where we ignore and it's not dealt with. We certainly don't want to go aggressive where our emotions are what are driving us. But we want to be assertive, and that means that we're rational. That means we have thought through the situation. That means our emotions are in check. We're calm, we're confident, and we can speak. And whether or not the person hears or responds is not up to us, it's really up to them. So we need to strive to be assertive in confrontations. The second thing that the Lord told Joshua to do was he and the people were to consecrate themselves. God said, tell the people, consecrate yourselves in preparation for tomorrow. That which is devoted is among you. You can't stand against your enemies until you remove it. So everybody in Israel was to spend an entire day examining themselves. Asking God, search my heart. Do I have anything wrong? Have I done anything? Have I sinned in any way? Show me, please. And they were to so consecrate and dedicate themselves and ask the Holy Spirit to come and show them what they might have done. You know, in the law, there's a thing called the clean hands doctrine, where we don't bring someone to court. We don't make accusations against someone unless we first examined our own heart and our own motives to be sure that we might not be guilty when we're pointing a guilty finger at somebody else. But you know, during this time of consecration, I wonder what was going through Achan's mind. I mean, Achan knew what he did was wrong because he took those things and he buried them in the tent. He didn't show them off and hang them on the wall and say, whoa, look what I found, the goods from the victory, yeah, here's my trophy. But he buried them, so he knew he had done something wrong. You would think that he would have just come to Joshua quietly and said, hey, you know what? I'm the perpetrator. I'm the one who did it. I'll show you where everything is. I'll take the consequence on myself, but I humbly apologize. But he never did that. He never came and apologized to Joshua. Instead, the entire nation, male, female, adults, kids, they all had to go through this time of consecrating themselves. Maybe Achan had convinced himself he hadn't done anything wrong. Or maybe he thought, I'm probably not the only one who did something, so when they cast lots, when we go before Joshua and the elders, maybe the lot's going to fall on somebody else and I might get off scot-free. When we're going to confront someone about a wrongdoing, we need to make sure that we're not guilty of doing the same thing, or guilty really of anything for that matter. And then the third thing that God told Joshua was, make sure you follow through. I mean, don't just go through the process of discovering who the perpetrator is, but follow through. So imagine this. The priest may have come with what's called the Urim and the Thummim. This is how they made decisions. This is how the Lord spoke to them. And it was kind of like, and I'll oversimplify it, kind of like a dice that you would roll and it would say yes or no on it. And so the Israelites were lined up tribe by tribe, 12 tribes of Israel, all lined up. And when the first tribe would come, they'd roll the dice and they would ask God, is this the tribe where the sin is? And the first time it said no. So that whole tribe was free. The next tribe would come, roll the dice. God, is this the tribe that's guilty? And no. When Achan's tribe showed up, they rolled the dice, and this is it. So somewhere in this tribe, somebody has committed the sin. So then they break that tribe into clans. And now each clan has to appear before Joshua and the elders, and they go through the same process. And then after the clan, when that Achan's clan was discovered, then they're lined up by family. So now it's each family. And then finally the lot fell on Achan. And Joshua says to Achan, come clean, man, what'd you do? And Achan said, okay, I'm the guilty one. I did this. And they went and they found the possessions that he had buried in the tent. Confrontation is not always pleasant. In fact, I don't know if it's ever pleasant, but it is necessary. And we do need to know how to confront people in a godly, healthy way. Otherwise, other people are going to suffer. Look at what happened to Israel because of Achan's sin. All those military guys died, and the entire nation had to go through that time of consecrating, probably that fear, that anxiety that was so unnecessary. So Achan sinned, he disobeyed, but all he needed to do was come clean. And I wonder how the story would have been different if he had just come and openly confessed. So when we confront people about things, one of two things will happen. They'll either accept it and they'll change, or they'll reject it. Their response is not our responsibility. That's between them and the Lord. We just need to go about doing the right thing with clean hands and a pure heart. And the rest then is up to God. I've got one more thought that I want to bring up, actually moving ahead to the New Testament. But first, let me remind you that our next assignment is going to be, we're moving into chapter 23 already. We've only got 3 more of these studies to do, and I've really enjoyed preparing these. I loved writing the book, and I'm really enjoying doing more of the verbal teaching on these, and I hope you've enjoyed them as well. And if you have, please share them, and feel free to leave your comments as well. But we're going to move into chapter 23, and then I'd like for you to read Isaiah chapter 5, verses 1 to 7. And next time we're going to talk about how we can work within God's limits. We might be doing more than what God intends for us to do. And hopefully that will be a real liberating lesson for all of us, actually. In Matthew 18, Jesus instructs the disciples, if someone has offended you, or if someone sins against you, you're to go to him just one-on-one. Don't take a whole group. Don't talk about it with a group, but just keep it between the two of you. If he has sinned against you, go confront that person in a very loving way, not in a passive way, not aggressively, but assertively, and approach them about what they have done. It goes on to say, if they don't respond, then take someone else with you, so you've got a witness, and then if they still don't respond, tell whatever leaders need to be told and leave it in their hands. But Jesus said, if you go one-on-one, who knows, you might win a brother back. And then in Galatians 6, Paul says, if someone is caught in a sin, not maybe a sin against you, but they're just caught in a sin, you who are spiritual should restore him gently. Restore him gently. The word restore in the Greek actually means if someone has broken a bone, the restoration is we would become the cast on that bone. And that brokenness, the sin, would be mended while we would come along and support that person like a cast. And we would say to them, I'm going to stay with you. I'm going to hold on to you until you have fully recovered from that sin, until you're fully, completely living in victory. That's not passive confrontation. That's not aggressive. That's being assertive. And then he goes on to say, you will win your brother back. So my question for you is, what are you afraid of that you're staying down on your face? Stand up. Don't be afraid to confront. Who knows? You just might win a brother back. I hope you've enjoyed this today. Go and confront. I'll be praying for you that God gives you wisdom and helps you find that perfect balance to not be passive, don't be aggressive, but just be assertive and go. You might win a brother back. Have a good week. Enjoy.